Hello there, guys. Welcome back to another episode of E&Ftv. Today, we are joined by the amazing Emma Gaymer, who is the founder of Bamboo Sales and Marketing Consultancy. Emma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's great to get you on the show. It's great to get you on the show. I know, obviously, we've been talking actually for quite a while now. Not only about the show, but also about your business, what you've been doing, and of course about a partnership that we've sort of put together very recently. So that's something we can come on to as well.
Exciting.
But yeah, so really exciting times. I suppose first off, how we generally like to start the show is really understanding a bit about you, your background. I suppose what brought you to starting your business, and I suppose what that business now provides. So I suppose, Emma, please do take it away.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, I think like a lot of people you've had on the show, I started out, operationally. Age 14, I was sent off from home, no having fun in the school holidays, time to earn some money. And I worked for an outside catering company, going to some absolutely beautiful venues and, serving people at weddings. And I just loved it, and that's what really kind of started my hospitality bug. And then every time I went away with family to go and stay in a hotel, it was always the one that was kind of snooping around, looking in the doors that said private and, wondering what was going on behind the scenes. So I ended up going on to study hotel management, and I worked around the different departments. And it was when I kind of was at uni and I did a placement year over in Florida that I went into more of the kind of sales and events side. Sure. And that's when I kind of really thought, oh, this is interesting. This is kind of where I want to be. So I joined IHG when I graduated and had my first kind of event sales role, and wanted to have another kind of overseas experience and allow my career to give me that opportunity to travel and work. Sure. So I did a couple of years in New Zealand with working at the Langham in Auckland, which is a stunning property. Yeah. And then came back and rejoined IHG. And I had always really set my sights on doing a new hotel opening. And there's an independent hotel just down in Brooklands in Surrey, and I joined before that opened as part of the pre-opening team. Right. And that was manic. That was I was doing a kind of dual role between sort of managing the reservations team and the event sales team. Right. And I'll never forget that experience. It was great. It was really hard work, but loved it. And my GM there at the time said, "Oh, if you think this is tough, you should try a reopening." So being the sort of person that I am, I was like, "Yeah, I can take on a reopening."
Yeah, and, of course.
And I really wanted to get into the London market and kind of into back into the luxury market. So that's when I went back into central London and joined the Stafford, which at the time was part of Kempinski. Right. And they were under full renovation with about a couple of months to go to reopening. And the GM at my previous job was definitely right. It was much harder than the new opening. Yeah. But I was there for 3 years, and we kind of rebuilt the business. And it's a stunning hotel. Like I really got a massive soft spot for the Stafford. Right. From there, I had a bit of a change, and went to CBRE and joined the brokerage and investment and kind of consultancy team within CBRE. So I learned loads about completely different sides of the industry. Yes. And then did a stint at Surrey University, setting up their executive education specifically for the hospitality and tourism industry, which was another, really big challenge and a job that I loved. But it kind of got me itching to be back in the industry again. So I went back into London and joined an events venue that was, funnily enough, going under a renovation.
You love it, don't you?
So yeah, I know. I'm just a sucker for a challenge. I think it's really interesting, like strategically as well, how you approach that scenario, and with how you manage the team and everything. So, and I guess that's eventually what led me round to thinking about where I could niche into my own business, because I thought, well, there's not many people in the industry who've got several experiences of doing kind of openings and reopenings.
Yeah.
And so when I first set up Bamboo, I was really like wanting to target hotels and venues that were in that situation, that didn't necessarily have an expert person who'd got experience from a sales and marketing side of
Sure.
kind of going through that whole process. And what really led me to starting my own business was just really wanting to use my knowledge and experience to help more companies to grow.
Yeah.
And so I was very targeted towards hospitality in the beginning, which was towards the end of 2019. And then, of course, we've just been through what I call the COVID roller coaster. So lots has changed. I've diversified, and now I work across a broader range of industries. But I'm still obviously very, very passionate about hospitality and still very connected to the industry. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was going to say as well, because you sort of said about having that bug for the hospitality industry, and that sort of coming through, a relatively early stage. Do you remember, or can you pinpoint when you really sort of fell in love with hospitality? Can you? Because some people sort of go, "Oh my God, it's this particular moment," or it was my parents,
Yeah.
or whatever. Is there a defining moment that sort of you can think of that where you go, "Do you know what? I love this business. I love this industry."
I mean, I love people. I love, I love getting to know people, being around people.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it's all about, right? And
Yeah.
when I was at school, and I was talking about how I wanted to go and study hotel management, there was no one else like me that had that desire. And I was in quite a big year group. I think there was probably about up to about 300 of us, and
Right.
lots of people were following quite traditional career paths of going to be a lawyer, or I don't know, an estate agent or whatever. And I just was like, no. And I actually had a lot of people take the piss out of me for what I wanted to do. And I think it's that thing of when people can be quite judgmental in a more sort of negative way. If you've got a particular drive towards something, that will never bother you. And so it only just kind of made me more determined to follow what I knew my gut was sort of telling me about this was the right path for me.
Yeah.
And my placement year at university was probably a big part of confirming that I'd sort of had done the right thing, because I just loved that job. I really, honestly, I used to have my 2 days off, and I used to actually look forward to it. I used to almost skip through the door. Like, I couldn't wait to see everyone. And, I just really enjoyed it. It's they say, don't they, that if you're in the right job, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And,
it's true.
that was how I felt back then. I just used to think it was fun.
This is it. I've got to admit, one of the best things about sort of my early years in hospitality, when I worked on property and things like this, is it was that, it didn't matter what, I had, like we all did, at some point, you get up, before the sun's even come up, you get into work, and you see people, in the, by the kitchens, or sort of very much in the deepest, darkest depths of the hotel, and you're all just having a bit of a laugh. Like, it really, those are the times where you really do connect with the people that you're working with.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, I had this chat with the head of revenue for a hotel and sort of hospitality business, and I was talking to him about the camaraderie and the family. I know it sounds so corny, but the family feel that you get on property, and when it's all hands on deck, you can truly trust the people that you're with to be with you on that. And it's very rare to find a collection of people which are so invested in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be the case. We all know that hospitality is sometimes very much generated towards filler jobs where they're studying or whatever.
Yes.
But there's certainly some really great life experiences built in hospitality. There's no doubt about it. And
absolutely.
And again, connections and friendships and everything else. I was talking to somebody quite recently, actually, it was on a clubhouse, and I spoke to the GM of the old property that I worked on. And he's actually a new GM, but who replaced the one that I was sort of, managed me and things. But he said,
Yeah.
honestly, come back, when everything opens up, come back, we'll have some food, we'll catch up, and we'll talk. And I just thought I don't know any other industry where you'd get that from somebody who's that managerial job, and they sort of hear that you used to work there, and they just say, "Do you know what? Come round, come over." That's hospitality in its purest form. I think it's come on, come over.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think it's just underestimated by those that haven't worked within it about, just how tough and challenging it can be.
Yeah.
And, it is a case of, every day is different. There's so much problem solving that goes on. You have to be creative with all these different scenarios. And that's, I think, when people, really come together, and it's just such a diverse, multicultural environment to be amongst as well.
Yeah. And to grow, to ultimately to develop.
Yeah.
I suppose coming to your specialism, which of course is sales and marketing. One of the biggest questions right now for anybody at the moment is, of course, the biggest challenges for hoteliers from a sales and marketing perspective in a post-pandemic market. Because of course, what we're going through right now, and for the relevance of this, actually, it is your specialism. You specialize in people reopening. You specialize in people reopening or renovating, and so on and so forth. I suppose from your perspective and your sort of experience, what do you believe are the biggest challenges for hoteliers going forward that they're currently going through now, but also into a post-pandemic market? What would you say they are?
I think it's a big question, and it's hard to generalize, because I mean, one thing I'm quite particular about with why I'm sort of a consultant is that I like to get to know each individual client and what their various challenges and situations are, and sort of give guidance based on that. So I think, if you say take a hotel that's in a coastal rural location right now, they're in a very different situation to, a London property that would normally, say, rely on, corporate and international travel. So I think, for every business, it's hard to plan. It's hard to think about the different scenarios that might be faced further down the line. There's different opinions out there depending on whether you want to be more positive or negative with COVID and what might happen in terms of a potential third wave. Some people believe that's really a thing. Others are just no, we're out of it now and it's fine. It's onwards and upwards from here. So I think it's important to actually be really realistic and plan for the different scenarios and think about contingencies. A lot of teams have been really stripped back, and people that are left within the business have roles that have become that have morphed and have become they've got responsibilities for things that they've never had to do before. So it's having to adapt and probably learn quite quickly, sort of on the job, and do different things. Which it's how you manage that situation that I think is a challenge. And for thinking about your market and your customers, it's that whole loyalty piece, which is the challenge. Actually, if you've got everyone who's been on furlough and none of your kind of regular clients have actually had any engagement from a sales team, it's really important to actually focus on how you're going to renew that loyalty from a market that may not be active right now, but they certainly will be in the future. And how are you then going to get them back? So it's kind of managing your short versus long-term scenarios and demand that I think is where there's going to be more of a challenge. And as well, there's a lot of development going on with technology in hotels. And it's how you choose to balance that up with finding the right level of customer service and the right sort of experience that people are used to having within the brand or whatever it might be, so that you've still got that human touch and that experiential side that you expect with hospitality, but then you've got the right level of kind of automation and the right systems and all of that sort of thing. So that's there's a lot of conversations going on around that, and interesting decisions being made.
I suppose again, I've lost count how many times I've been on conversations and different platforms talking about this, but there's a massive focus on the customer journey. Arguably, probably more than ever now, because of the disruption that's happened. Now, as you say, there's been a lot of innovation and creativity from a tech perspective. And there is an argument from two sides, whether the hoteliers are in a position to invest in that yet. And some would argue this is the time to invest. And of course, the hoteliers or the owners are sort of saying, well, we can't look to invest until the doors are open. And there's a bit of a catch-22 is, yes, but if we don't have the tech, then we're already going to be behind the curve and so on and so forth. I suppose from your perspective, what do you think from a disruption perspective it's done for the industry in a positive way? Because we all know the negatives that have happened from from COVID, closures, people being made redundant, so on and so forth. There's countless sort of platforms that have spoken about this. From a positive perspective, what do you think the disruption has brought from what you see?
I would say it's brought more of a focus on value rather than just being quite fixated on price. Because markets have become probably a bit more sensitive in terms of what they're looking for and what's important to them. And I think from a sales side of things, it's naturally sort of pushed us down the way of more kind of consultative style of selling. And really thinking about individuals' needs and preferences and wanting to provide to those, and kind of really knowing how to more kind of nurture relationships rather than just having that kind of just simple transaction.
For sure.
So I think that's a positive thing, definitely. But there's never, you can't talk down if you've got the ability to enhance your customer journey through more effective kind of technology and automation, and that's going to present sort of a mutual benefit in terms of a cost saving within the business, but also it's responding to the demand in the market that people want to buy in that way, then that's a win-win.
No, definitely. And again, it's one of these things that I've said this countless times on this show, but with this disruption, I do believe that it's actually brought people in our professional circles anyway a lot closer. So we're not in person yet, but we've had opportunities where maybe we wouldn't have done before. And I also think from a hotelier perspective, I believe it's driven a necessity for positive change, whereas before it might have taken us another decade to get to where some of us are now. And it's sort of enhanced or amplified the need to have to push that. And I from my perspective, as somebody that's trying to push the hospitality industry to make certain changes, I think this has actually been a real kick up the ass, actually, in some ways, to be honest. And from what you're saying, it definitely sounds like that's been happening, which is great. I've got to say,
I think it's accelerated what was already going to happen in a good way, but also people have been connecting in a much more open way rather than having a certain thing they're trying to achieve from connecting with someone. And I think people have been very open to supporting each other and helping with referrals and connections and support and actually building more partnerships and things. And I'm sure that will continue.
In terms of sales and marketing then, because of course on this show, of course, I always say we mainly focus on revenue management and commercial analytics. You know, that's my bread and butter, I suppose. But I have come to realize over the last sort of year or so that sales and marketing are fundamental elements to that commercial function. It's sort of it is a given. And what we're
Yes.
seeing is a wider commercial push as a whole, rather than just revenue management being that commercial brain and everybody else following suit.
Mhm.
It is very much a wider view, if you like. Now, from a sales and marketing perspective, how has the market, or how has the role function, if you like, changed over the last 10 years? What's evolved? What's changed? And I suppose, where do you see it going? Where do you see that role evolving to down the line?
Yeah. Well, I think it's broadened,
Mm,
and it's become so much more specialist in every kind of area of marketing. It's much harder to be a really good generalist now than it would have been 10 years ago.
sure. Yeah.
And you look at just something like social media and how that's evolved, and how you 10 years ago could have had someone who was looking after all of your social media platforms quite easily,
Yeah.
probably alongside other things. But now you've got so many different specialists in each channel, and there's more of them.
Mm,
And to be effective with them, if you're going to get the most out of them, they do need a lot more dedicated sort of strategic approach and time and content creation, etc. So
yeah.
I think everything has kind of morphed more in terms of it's got more complex, more specialist.
Mm,
And if you try and take on everything as a sales and marketing person, you're just going to struggle.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so outsourcing is really important. Um, Customers and sort of the technological side in terms of advancements, how it's
Mm,
given people access to so much more choice. Being able to respond to that effectively needs more time.
yeah.
And it's a case of like you need to be doing perhaps less, but doing it really well, rather than
Mm,
taking a more generalized approach. And I think, yeah, we never saw, did we, 10 years ago, virtual reality type things going on
no.
so much.
Yeah.
Now, I think customers, in terms of choice, if you're doing everything that you can to give the customer options of how they engage with you, you
Mm,
go onto a website and you can email, you can phone, you can do a phone call, you can send an inquiry form, you can go on a chat bot, you can do some kind of voice search. And it's like,
mm,
it's just morphed. And so if you're not kind of responding to expectations in that market, and by having those options, I think there's going to be a bit of a fallback there. But obviously that does come down to an individual hotel and who their market
sure.
is.
Yeah.
Um, but the personalization element has also become more important.
Mm,
Um, there's a lot more companies now who are using their data in a smart way.
yeah.
So they're actually being able to like understand their customers properly in terms of how they choose to buy, where they look, how they do their research, what's important to them, what kind of keywords, keyword analysis type thing.
Mm,
Companies that are really tapping into the data that they can get from Google and from their internal systems, who are then actually, customizing their communications in a very personalized way, will be much more successful in terms of their conversion than those that aren't.
yes.
10 years ago, that wasn't really a thing.
I suppose, in terms of the expectation then,
Mm.
from, okay, let's say from a hotelier's perspective, what do you think, or how do you think their expectations have changed with regards to sales and marketing? Do you think that they have been sort of elevated because the complexity of the sales and marketing function has now ultimately become more complex? Or is it sort of very similar to what it was before? So have hoteliers changed the expectation of what they're expecting from their sales and marketing teams?
Oh. Um, oh gosh. that's hard to generalize on, I think,
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um,
It's one of these
but
things. The reason I ask it is
yeah,
because from a revenue management standpoint, over the last 5-10 years, the role has massively changed.
yeah,
Now, revenue management, albeit, has been a slightly sort of more younger function, if you like. It's come into its sort of own from
mm,
the airline and so on, and we've seen the developments within the hotel industry.
mm,
But what I've seen from a revenue management standpoint is that
yes,
expectation of the revenue manager has continuously risen, and the discipline has therefore had to elevate every single time. The courses within universities have had to change year on year.
mm,
Salaries have ultimately gone up with regards to revenue management, and therefore the expectation of a client for a revenue manager from a revenue manager is higher than ever. And in a lot of cases, they are sort of seen to be that commercial lead or the person that the sales and marketing do report into.
mm,
Arguably, I know there's some sales and marketing people out there that would be like, hell no. But that seems to be the case. And I just wondered if there was a similar trend with regards to sales and marketing, because the role has had to become, as you say, more specialized. They've had to
mm,
understand how different things work and adapt to the times of change and technology. So it was one of those things where I was debating it because revenue management has certainly seen it, and I was wondering
yeah,
if sales and marketing had followed suit or inevitably will, I suppose, because
yeah,
I know talking to a couple of people, marketing and very much more specifically e-commerce, those guys are like, gold dust right now in terms of their
hmm,
skill set and what they're
yes,
bringing to the table. Because
yes,
marketing's everything now. Let's be honest. It
yeah.
arguably drives the business. So I don't know. It was just one of those things where I
Yeah.
thought, would there be similarities there or not?
Yeah.
I suppose.
I think I think any sort of leader who would have been skeptical in the past about the need,
Mm,
for sales and marketing,
yeah,
probably wouldn't be anymore.
yeah, yeah. Fair.
Um,
Yeah.
and I do still think that role, that department, it is often not treated with enough sort of importance, if you like, in terms of
Yeah.
the impact that they actually have
Yeah.
on bringing people in.
Yeah.
Um, I would think that this last year will have changed anyone that sort of doubted that function
Yeah.
quite substantially, to realise that it's not something that you can sort of save some pennies on, if you like.
Yeah.
You do need to have an adequate resource if you want to be successful.
Mm. And again,
Um,
it's sort of making sure that you don't fall behind the curve as well, right? It's,
mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, any business that comes in right now,
Yeah.
it's stepping into a very saturated market, and it's going to become very much a piranha type situation where a
Mm.
sniff of business comes into the market, boom, everybody's on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if your sales and marketing functions are not in the right place at the right level, your other properties in your comp set will be
Mm.
ready. And I think you're right. I think that
Yes.
realization of that function as a whole, the commercial function, they're treating it with a lot more importance, if we say,
Yeah.
and a lot
Yeah.
more focus, which for me is a
Yeah.
massive win. Um,
Well,
I
a lot
suppose.
of,
Oh yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, like, that hotels, a lot of them, their what they would have known as their kind of key market might
Yeah,
not doesn't exist right now in many
yeah,
cases.
yeah,
And so, there has been a lot of adaptation, and the lovely P word that I hate to use, to do different things and attract new business.
yeah.
And that wouldn't have been a success at all without there being, a sales and marketing effort driving that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think it is absolutely key. And you talk a lot about revenue management as well, but
Mm.
those functions need to actually be working in harmony,
Yeah.
to
Now
get the
more than ever.
best. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
um,
We lovely friends over at Revenue Hacks, they've been saying for the last, well, over a year now, stop the silos, and it's one of these things where if that collaborative approach isn't being built fundamentally from the ground up now, again, you're behind the curve, because everybody else is cottoning onto this. And if you're still in that old mindset, you're not going to be on top form. It's as simple as that. I suppose from your perspective now, obviously it's been a crazy year. What's been going on with you? What's been going on with the business? Any developments, anything, in particular that's been working for you?
Well, I've seen, good level of success with my sort of audits, which I call my Marketing 360.
Yes. Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
Which sometimes gets mistaken as being smart marketing, but it is sales and marketing.
Yeah.
So it's really, the 360 is it. I'm sure you'll probably be familiar with it with your HR sort of involvement around what that means in terms of looking at something from an internal and external perspective.
Yes.
What your stakeholders think, what your employees think, what your customers think, etc. So it's doing an audit that looks at everything sales and marketing related, but seeing how that's working internally in terms of systems, processes, resources, and then obviously how it's working very much for the customer, and looking at the customer journey and thinking about everything from branding to content to channels, through to the reactive sales process, and then through to like loyalty, advocacy, and kind of creating repeat business and all of that. So it really just identifies opportunities for business in terms of what they're doing well, what they could be doing better, what they could try doing. And I think there's a tendency for businesses to focus in on one area of marketing or one part of sales, rather than step back and look at absolutely everything and kind of reassess from an overarching viewpoint of like what is working well and what could you be doing differently.
Sure.
So that's where I come in.
No, I love it.
To provide that guidance.
I was going to say, and now more than ever, that's what's needed. It's that thing again where your specialism almost comes into its own, because everybody is looking at their reopening strategies. And your audits, from what I've seen from this Marketing 360, because it was on your LinkedIn page. So if anybody's interested, it's actually on Emma's LinkedIn page. And it was really interesting to see how many points are actually covered all within that initial audit, and where that ultimately takes you next. Because of course, with any audit, it then gives you a roadmap, or where you go next with it. Apologies for my dogs. They seem to be having a right old conversation.
They want in on it.
I was going to say they clearly do. So with regards to, I suppose, your involvement and our partnership going forward, because of course we've been talking about, apologies for this, we've been talking about our partnership with regards to the Hotel Collective, right?
Yes, we must talk about that.
There's been some exciting developments with that, which I'm really excited about. But I suppose for anybody, again, that doesn't know your involvement with the Hotel Collective yet, can you just give us a bit of an idea, or the audience a bit of an idea, of what your element will be sort of providing and how that sits with the rest of them?
Yeah, of course. So I created a couple of sort of packages, especially to fit in with the offering of the Hotel Collective. And one is really focused on the customer journey. So looking at, all the different touch points, very much from a customer viewpoint. I've done, quite a bit of mystery shopping in my time at various different levels. So it's sort of taking that type of approach really from the customer side, assessing, your competitor set, doing a SWOT analysis. And it's just amazing how when you're in something every day, there's things that you just don't notice. And having an independent person come in and sort of go through in a very detailed way everything that you're doing, proactively and reactively, just the smallest of suggestions and tweaks to one small area of that customer journey can make huge difference to how a business will perform in terms of their kind of lead generation and conversion.
Sure.
So that's what that really sort of taps into. And then the other package is more focused around sort of sales and marketing strategy. So going back to kind of what we were talking about earlier of thinking about, short, medium and long-term goals, different scenarios, how you can plan for different situations, and how you can utilize your marketing budget more effectively to get a better return. Perhaps it might highlight some areas of need in terms of training on skills and confidence within the sales team, that type of thing. And it's really just to provide support, in particular to independent hotels who might not have head office support, or might not have someone within the business who has worked at a senior level within sales and marketing.
Yes.
And it will fit really nicely with the other offerings that sit as part of Hotel Collective as well. To support the revenue and commercial side. But then if there's an identification within the work that I do, that there's the need for some new content creation or a refresh of a website or some new imagery or whatever, then we've obviously got the rest of the team that can help specifically with that.
No, this is it. And that's, I suppose, ultimately why it works actually really well. It's one of these things where it's all pretty seamless from the initial sort of revenue management piece through to sales and marketing, the e-commerce, the digital media creation, and then finally the training and development piece. I suppose that's why it's very much designed the way it is. And I've got to say, we're thrilled to have you on board.
Thank you. It's great to be part of the group.
It's
and I think it's such an easy thing as well for someone who is looking for help. It's just, I hate to use the phrase, but one-stop shop, and everything's just really simple. You can pick and choose from these different packages what's necessary, and it's so cost effective as well, really high value.
It's one of these things again where from that outsourced perspective, we all know that outsourcing right now is probably more useful than ever, because you're going to get specialists in to get your business back on its feet while you're then focusing on the more longer term goal of getting your people back on in the right way, which is exactly what we sort of tailor it for. And it's a really good space to be in. But no, what I want to say to everybody is, if you want to learn a bit more about Emma's Marketing 360, as I said, it's actually on her LinkedIn page. And I know for a fact that she would love to hear from anybody that's interested in talking to her a bit more about that and finding out some more information. Of course, with regards to the Hotel Collective side of things, you're more than welcome to go over to our website, which I will put in the link to the description below, where you can see all the details about the different elements. And Emma's is, of course, on there as well. Emma, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for taking the time out to join us today.
Not at all.
It's been an absolute pleasure from my perspective, because it's very rare that we get somebody from that sales and marketing perspective, but also to get your insight into the challenges that are going on for hoteliers right now, and then going into a post-pandemic market, because I do think that's massively important, especially with you specializing in reopenings. I just think it was such a great sort of combination.
And as you know, I have a an
affinity for them.
I do. Most people want to run away from them, but I'm like, yes, please. So,
exactly that. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure. So I want to say a massive thank you to you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And great to see all the success that you've been having recently as well, Tom. And I look forward to working with you on the Hotel Collective.
Fantastic. And guys, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. As ever, please make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Make sure that you're following us on Instagram, where we do update everybody that we've got coming up on future episodes. And of course, make sure you follow me on LinkedIn, and Emma, in fact, to find out what we're up to, because we are both very active on there as well. But for now, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Make sure you see who's on next week's episode.